I'm not gonna say I'm a professional booktuber who can read over 100 books a year. I've tried in the past to hit that goal, but it's infeasible with my busy schedule. And believe it or not, I do have a social life outside of reading. However, I will give you advice from a more realistic standpoint from someone who works a full-time job, also has a hobby of making YouTube videos, running an Instagram, and running an Etsy shop while also managing to read about 85 books a year. Hi, I'm Cass, and in today's video, I'll be sharing with you various tips and methods on how to realistically read more books in 2022 or any year to come. First off, the simplest change you can make is by having your book visible to you while also being easily accessible. If you have your book just stuffed away on a shelf or hidden underneath a stack of unread mail, it's very out of sight, out of mind. Instead, try setting your book on a bedside table or replace where your phone usually goes with a book. That way you're more likely to reach for your book rather than your phone. Another thing that really helped me was to surround myself with bookish people, whether that be online or in real life. I have a friend, Lexi, who I'll occasionally meet up at a coffee shop. We'll chat to catch up, and then we'll just sit there and read together. This is especially great for people whose love language like mine is quality time, so pro tip. As for people online, Twitter and Facebook groups is a great way to connect. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups that are specific towards a certain book or book series. The key is to not compare yourself to any hardcore readers you might interact with or find in these groups. If you read 5 books last year and your new goal is 10, that is still 100% valid and makes you a reader. You don't have to read hundreds of books every year to consider yourself a reader. But by being in these groups and surrounding yourself with these bookish people, you will find that their excitement for books is very infectious. Now, another great tip that you can pair with the previous tip is to actually buddy read. Now, buddy reading is when you and a friend read the same book at the same time. You can set loose deadlines and then meet up to talk about plot, characters, and different predictions you might have. Or the way that I do it is I like to text and ask how far into the book they are, and then we'll send each other reactions as we read. It's a really good way to help motivate yourself to pick up the book. That way you can share your reactions, while on the flip side, also getting to see your friends' reactions to the book. The hardest part of anything is starting, whether that be starting a new diet, starting to work out, and starting to read. A trick that I started using is to tell myself that I'm just going to read one chapter. And then if I end up wanting to read more than one chapter, I allow myself to do so. Now, if a chapter still seems like way too much, just try convincing yourself to read a single page. And if you read that one page and you don't want to read at that very moment, you can put your bookmark in and shut your book. And now you're already a page further than you were prior. Another pro tip that I like to do is when I want to be done with reading, and if I end on a chapter, I'll read a page or two into the next chapter. That way it doesn't feel like a daunting beginning and instead feels like I'm gonna pick something back up that I was right in the middle of. Here is my absolute favorite piece of advice. Read whatever the fuck you want, okay? Historical fiction, autobiographies, sci-fi, straight up smut, anything goes. Reading is a hobby, and hobbies are supposed to be fun. So many people tell me that they hate reading, but I have to hold my tongue from telling them, no, you don't hate reading, you just haven't found the right book. And then all through high school, you're forced to read all these boring ass books, and now they associate reading with boring ass books that they were forced to read. And speaking of the forced reading, fuck the classics, okay? You don't have to like classics or read classics to be considered a reader. There's no rules, there's no standard box you have to fit in. If you don't like classics, don't read them. If you do like classics, good on you, read them. But you shouldn't judge someone for what they read. And on that note, reading for fun also means putting away books that you don't enjoy. If you're not enjoying a book, no one is forcing you to read it. You didn't sign a contract in blood stating that if you didn't finish the book, the world was gonna end. And if you did sign that contract, finish the book, and then refrain from ever signing a contract in blood that involves the world ending, okay? And who knows, you may return to a book that you didn't previously enjoy. For example, when I was reading King of Scars, I really couldn't get into it, and so I DNF'd it or did not finish it. Once the Shadow and Bone series was coming to Netflix though, it kind of reignited my passion for the Grishaverse, and so I returned and read King of Scars and was able to get through it and thoroughly enjoyed it. There is a harsh reality when it comes to wanting to read more. You actually have to read. I know. Shocking. You have to open the book. You have to hit play on your audiobook. The books aren't gonna read themselves. You have to actually prioritize reading as one of your hobbies. It's a lot easier to just pick up your phone and scroll through TikTok or binge watch a Netflix series, and nothing is wrong with those hobbies. I do that quite a lot. However, if you want to read more, you have to prioritize reading. Now, if you're not willing to give up any of those hobbies by replacing it with reading, you can instead try to pair the two hobbies together. So maybe you can watch one episode of a TV show and then read a few chapters and alternate back and forth. I remember one day I was particularly busy. I had a super long to-do list. I would check off a thing or two on that list and then read 1 or 2 chapters. If not having time to read is your biggest obstacle, you can definitely try a different format of reading. Audiobooks are so great to read while also getting things done. Whenever I was too busy or I couldn't find the attention span to stare at dead trees with words on them, I would just pop on my headphones and hit play on my audiobook. Another more transportable method of reading is going to be ebooks, whether that be on a Kindle or on your phone. I work as a server, and sometimes there are extended periods of time where nothing's happening. We're not that busy. And so I would always have a book on my phone that I would just sit there and read. And occasionally I would also bring in physical books, and my managers would just make fun of me, but they were right. I am a nerd. Your reading session doesn't have to be an hour or 2. In fact, when I get out of reading slumps, I might only read for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And the coolest thing is you don't realize how quickly those 5-10 minutes add up, and then suddenly you finish a book. You'd be surprised at how fast you can actually finish a book from only picking it up a few times a day for short periods of time. And since our generation's attention span is absolutely fucked because of TikTok, it's actually really hard sometimes to just sit down and read, and it takes practice to get into the groove of things. You can't start to get back into reading or get into reading in the first place and expect to sit there for 6 hours staring at words. That's like saying that you're gonna go run a marathon after not working out for over a year. Another tip is to figure out what type of reader you are. Are you someone who likes setting a TBR, a to be read list that you want to get through each month? Or are you like me, a mood reader who revolts against any form of structure when it comes to reading? And the second you tell yourself that you have to read this particular book, you revolt and you don't pick up the book for months or years. I know a lot of booktubers and bookstagrammers set a TBR every single month, and for the longest time I thought I had to do that. But then every time I did that, I would immediately get into a reading slump. However, once I ditched that method and decided to read wherever the fuck I wanted, I found so much more enjoyment with reading. You can also try reading different books at the same time. With me being a mood reader, sometimes picking up an adult fantasy series that is going to make my head spin with all the world building and info dumping doesn't exactly sound pleasant after a 10-hour long shift. So instead, I might pick up a fun and easy YA romance novel. Even though I might have been enjoying the adult fantasy book, I might not be in that particular mood to read it, and it takes a lot more brain power to get through. However, with that, make sure that you don't read the same genre, especially when it comes to fantasy, because I would find that I would mix up the two worlds and just be confused during both reads. So that's why I like having like a cute, fun, easy read paired with some sort of more difficult read that I might not always be in the mood to read, even though I might be enjoying it. If you can't for the life of you get yourself to actually pick up a book, try changing your environment. Whether that be creating a little book nook filled with pillows and blankets specifically for reading only, or going to a coffee shop bringing nothing but a book. That way you can give yourself an extra push of motivation, especially the coffee shop method, because if you only bring your book into the coffee shop with nothing else to do, it might be really awkward to just stare at a wall. So then you'll probably read to actually pass the time and not be as awkward. If you don't want to spend the money to go to a coffee shop, or they're just not your thing, the library is incredible. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and you're literally surrounding yourself with books. And once you're able to actually pick up a book, and if you end up reading the entire thing and finishing it, never end a reading session without picking up another book. And I don't mean like, oh, you close the book and you immediately grab the next one and start. I mean, don't let too much time pass between you finishing a book and you starting a book. That way it's easier to actually continue reading and not getting stuck in a slump of figuring out what book you want to read next and actually convincing yourself once again to actually pick up that book. And my final tip for you is to like the video if you found it helpful and exit out of this video and go pick up a freaking book.